Good to be here on this Wednesday. Tonight is the Nighthawks and Knicks. Game 5 could be all over tonight if Trae Young and company decide it's over. How about we put it that way? They get to decide it's over, not the Knicks and all of that. So coming up tonight, Hawks and Knicks. Trae Young, 27.5 points a game for the Hawks thus far in the postseason. Do we see it closed out tonight, and are the Hawks moving on?
Well, it's going to be tough. You talk about playing on the road. You talk about a closeout game. Those are, the most difficult sometimes in basketball. But I do think it starts with Trae Young. He's been absolutely unbelievable. Going back to the game winner, the floater, the shooting, the efficiency, and the distribution of the basketball. You've seen great three-point shooting in this series. A lot of that, Ben, I think, is because you've had, Trae being a part of it, but also, penetrating, kicking. So looking to him to be the catalyst, but you're going to have to bring your A game defensively to win this series tonight.
Yeah, I do agree with something Kevin said. I do think if the Hawks decide this last game is going to be the last game. I mean, when Clint Capella comes out and say, "Oh, they want to try to push us around," as if to say we can't push them around, and Julius Randle hasn't been Julius Randle. I know he got most improved player in the NBA. BJ hasn't been himself. Kind of hasn't been able to put two solid games together. Trae Young has been lights out. And the whole thing about it is I keep going back to the narrative, how quickly it shifted. Oh, this Atlanta Hawks team was in a rebuild year. They had to get rid of their coach halfway during the year. This is the Knicks team that's finally putting it all together. Oh, they're down 3-1. Well, we already kind of knew this Atlanta Hawks team was kind of like ahead of this. No, I think that because, Trae Young and this very young Atlanta Hawks team has gone through it like in a different way, because they were looking at an Eastern division that's gotten very, very competitive very, very quickly when they were supposed to be scratching and clawing to be the 7th or 8th seed. Nope. Here they are, up 3-1 against a team that's, reloading, rebuilding, whatever you want to call New York. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's about the Hawks. Julius Randle, that's a good story. Derrick Rose, I'm happy that your career is turned around. R.J. Barrett is definitely a superstar in the making, but it's about them A-Town down Hawks. I think they ended the night.
Yeah, we talked to Bob Rathman about this yesterday. He said if not for a blown lead there in game 2, this thing will be over already. I mean, the Hawks have played a close game in game number 1. Outside of that, they've really kind of dominated the series. I mean, they blew a lead in game 2, but we're up big. And then obviously we saw what happened once it came back to Atlanta. I mean, I think this is a Hawks team playing with a lot of, great emotion, a lot of, positive vibes here, and a lot of momentum heading in their way, man. And it's like, I think for as much as people are like, hey, I wish the Hawks would just quit talking and going back and forth with the Knicks and just beat them and let that be what it is. Now, I think the Hawks this has been a moment where they kind of said, look, all right, say what you want. We're going to say it back, and then you still can't beat us. I think that is something different we've seen from this Hawks team. We haven't normally seen the Hawks be a kind of talk back franchise. We haven't seen them play with a lot of fire and vigor. I mean, they could score a lot and played no D, coming into this season. And it's really been the last half of the year they kind of developed that mentality where, I mean, what do you hear about teams that don't play D? Well, they like to score, but they're not really tough when it matters. I mean, I think that was the Hawks' MO perfectly until Nate McMillan came on board and he said, look, you can't be the team you want to be if we're going to be soft on defense. And they've kind of turned that around and it's carried over to the court. And look what happened. A team tried to come in there and physically push you around, and your team responded and said, no, we're not having it. We're going to exchange the war of words in the press, and we're going to go after you on the court as well. And it's been fun to see.
I'm with you. I think this team has an edge. I think they're playing with confidence, emotion, swagger, and I think you've seen that kind of manifest itself out there on the floor. And I do think defensive intensity is sort of where it starts, and you've seen the Hawks not only this postseason against New York be really effective defensively, but really the whole turnaround, right? When you think about the season turnaround, I know you've gotten some guys healthy, Bogdanovich, Gallinari, but you've really been starting your offensive rhythm in some respects with defense. And you are one of just a couple of teams holding your opponent to less than 100 points per game on average in the playoffs. We all know Clint Capella led the NBA in the regular season in rebounding. He's been great on the glass, but you know what else he does really well? Alters shots, over 2 blocks per game, impacts many more shots than that. So yes, Trae Young's a catalyst. We know that. His confidence sort of sets the tone for the whole team, but defense see what this team does the opening 5 minutes, the opening quarter. If this is a game where Atlanta is really flexing its muscle defensively, I think that's a great sign.
And they can come out there and play loose. I mean, when you got a 3-1 lead, I mean, yeah, you want to go ahead and close it out today, but it's not like you haven't given yourself a cushion. And that says a lot about a very, very, a very, very young Atlanta Hawks team that's got a full-blown superstar. When you talk about Trae Young, it's not easy to win in Madison Square. Everybody gets in baseball, look, you get your name in October. I mean, it doesn't matter what you do in the regular season. When it comes to basketball, obviously in the playoffs, but where you do it is more important that you do it. You do it in Madison Square when you talk about being able to start that little back and forth between him, and Spike Lee. But I think, BJ, another thing too, when you talk about this Hawks team is, nobody was really talking about them, right? Everybody expected them to just be another team in the East, scratching and clawing, as bottom feeders. But something else that we ain't forgetting about. I read a report that said, Joel Embiid got a little, slightly torn meniscus. I'm telling you, this Hawks team go up against the process. They got a shot at beating them too, because without Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons still can't shoot. I just don't understand that. You're an NBA player, but that's Kevin's favorite player. I don't want to talk about Ben Simmons like talking about Joe Flacco. I just stay away from those conversations. No, but I do think that a lot has to be said, BJ and Kevin, about the fact that people say, can you turn it on when it comes to defense later on in the season? The answer is yes, because they're doing it. And we're not saying you got to be the glove. We just saying you got to show some effort. And it seems like these Knicks team, like we go think about it. If our goal is to bully Atlanta, that was y'all tag. You're gonna bully them out there. Well, that's not working, coach. Not only is it not working, I mean, you don't want to foul Trae Young. He is almost automatic from the free throw line. I mean, so attitude check, effort check, defense check. Let's go ahead and close out these Knicks, move on to the next round. And sorry, Stephen A. Smith. I know you're trying to keep it professional on TV. You thought your Knicks was going to beat them young Hawks team, but no. But them A-Town down, them MLK units, though, man, fire. Nice.
Again, we'll see if they close it out tonight. Ben thinks they can beat Philadelphia. BJ, are you in that boat? I know a lot of people say, hey, whoever wins this series, it's a good story and a step in the right direction, but you're still not there with the top teams in the East when it matters in a 7-game series. Is that the case if the Hawks can close it out tonight?
Well, I think Atlanta has the attitude you have to have if you are going to advance, right? You believe in yourself. You have confidence. You have a star. You have a style of play that's working. Would I sit here and pick Atlanta over Philly in the second round? Probably not. That is an injury you have to keep an eye on, obviously, with one of the great players in the league in Embiid. But I think it's about closing it out, man. I mean, who here thought the Hawks were going to win a playoff series, not long ago? So you do what you got to do. And yes, you can worry about matchups. Theoretically, you can look ahead at the bracket, but you got to win tonight. And, Ben, when you were talking about the magic of the Garden, man, I thought you were going to tell the story Christian loves. You know what it's like to be in Madison Square Garden when a big moment's happening. You know what it's like. Tell the people.
I do know what it's like. I mean, most people think about the Garden. They think about Patrick Ewing. They think about John Starks. They think about MJ. They think about Reggie Miller. Bump all that. What about Elmo? We're talking about Elmo on ice. Yes, when I was up there in the NYC, I said, listen, going to the Mecca. And I was thinking, oh, man, we're gonna get to see the great Knicks players of the past. No, you're going to hear la 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 la, la 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 la, Elmo's World. And let me tell you something. LeBron, who cares? Tom Brady, they are nobodies. When that little red man came out there with his little orange nose, and Kevin, all I'm saying is this. Listen, you had every walk of life in there. Every walk of life, every demographic, every continent was in there to see Elmo. I don't know what everybody was saying, but when the beat dropped, they literally rushed the freaking state. I mean, they rushed up there. They said, wait, my child included. I'm like, listen, I'm looking at the other parents like, y'all children need to show a little bit more restraint. Y'all. They're like, sir, which child is yours? She's the one climbing on Elmo. Get off Elmo, yeah. No, all I'm saying is, you got Madison Square. You got Jordan. You got Bird. Who cares? Tickle Me Elmo is that dude. And
but seriously, if you close it out in the Garden, though, Ben, I mean, you played in great. If you close it out in the Garden, that's incredibly impressive.
It is, and let's face it. I mean, Trae Young needed this moment. We knew how great of a player Trae Young was. He's been a great player since he came in here. He had nothing to do with getting traded, for Luka, that he had nothing to do with that. People going crazy like he had something to do with it. But I will say this: Trae Young has gotten better each year, and he's added another element to his game. If he can add playoff, he can add winners in the playoffs to that. A lot of guys can't do that. I think this young man is on his way because, like I said, we're gonna always compare him to who we had. But I think, Trae Young is more than living up to it because Luka and those guys, they in the fight of their life too to try to move on. So that's Luka. We got Trae. Trae gonna have to do it against them young Knickerbockers. Sorry, Stephen A. This is what a winner looks like.
No, but hey, I think this is how you get a rep and how you get known, right? I mean, Trae Young could continue going the way he was going before Nate McMillan kind of forced him to think differently, and he would have been a good player in the city of Atlanta. And people said, hey, yeah, you can score a lot, but the Hawks don't really win a whole lot, and they're not very good, and it is what it is. You go in the playoffs and you beat New York and possibly push Philadelphia. I mean, we're chalking it up like it's going to happen. They're up 3-1. But you go in and win in New York and do it in the fashion that you've done. You kind of make that national name for yourself, where I think a lot of people are paying attention. They say, hey, now we know who Trae Young is. We're getting a look at John Collins. We're getting a look at the way this Hawks team plays. And hey, they've got some guys that we don't know anything about. Why? Because they were like 12 and 37 at one point and nobody cared, right? I mean, that's just the way it is. Now they've had a complete season turnaround with Nate McMillan, and you've got a burgeoning superstar. And I say superstar, not star, because Trae Young could be a star in Atlanta and nobody really knows much about him on the national scene. Nobody really talk about the Hawks on the national scene. I think you see that when you hear a lot of national pundits talk about this series, and Trae Young is about the only person's name that comes out of their mouth because they don't know anybody else on the team because there wasn't anybody worth knowing. So I think you're kind of seeing the emergence of the Hawks as a team here with some of their current players on this franchise taking that next step into stardom. And in Trae Young's case, I think superstardom if he can continue to play the way he has thus far.
I think that's fair. And I think you're talking about a compelling team, a compelling style, the storylines. This has been a, really, really fascinating series. And to think about where the Hawks are now compared to a couple of months ago, when things weren't going well, testament to everybody in that organization. And, they are in the driver's seat here. You don't want to let the Knicks get some momentum. You don't want that. Series can turn in a hurry. So you want to try to go ahead and take advantage of this opportunity tonight.
Very, very impressed by this Hawks team. Very, very impressed by Trae Young because Kevin, you know how it is. I mean, when he first got drafted, everybody kept saying, can he lead this team? Can he lead this team? And people were like, well, lead him to what? Like, they haven't really been relevant for a long time. I mean, sometimes, just a change of a coach can definitely help a team. Nate McMillan is not getting enough credit for what he's done. But, yeah, Trae Young moves on to the playoffs against the Knickerbockers. I mean, he's already starting a little rivalry with these guys. When they're trying to bully Trae Young. That's your strategy. The smallest guy on the court, you're trying to bully him? No. Averaging 27, over almost 96% on the free throw line. This young man we knew he was a star, but like you said, Kevin, you do it in the Madison Square, you get superstar status. Hopefully Jay-Z in the house tonight.
We've got so much to get to here on the show. We'll talk a lot of college football with the Hall of Fame ballot put out with the latest edition of guys who are eligible for the Hall of Fame. We'll also hear from Jake Crane. He had some pretty pointed things to say about Kirby Smart now that the Dogs were able to land two big transfers yesterday. We'll get to that. He will join us here on the program in about 20 minutes. Also, Rich Stiles will talk some golf with us. And Jake Roos, UGAsports.com, will talk about Kirby's big day yesterday in Athens. It is 3 and Out all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Love to hear from you. Hit us up on Twitter at Pigskin Radio. Again, streaming live, ESPNCoastal.com. Also live on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Good to have you here on this Wednesday. Kevin, BJ, and Ben, thanks for making us a part of your day. College Football Hall of Fame ballot is out. I think 70 some odd new names on the list. A couple of Georgia Bulldogs, Garrison Hurst on that list, one of the Georgia Bulldogs, and Champ Bailey. So 2 Georgia Bulldogs with a chance to be named College Football Hall of Famers when that vote takes place later this year.
And absolutely. And we were talking on you could go through all of them, but Sean Alexander, Eric Berry, Reggie Bush, Michael Crabtree, the Georgia guys, Josh Heupel, Marvin Jones, Andrew Luck, Peter Warwick, Bryant McKinney, Rashawn Salam, Roy Williams. I mean, Ben, this is every class is great. You're talking about superstars, obviously, but some of my favorite players growing up on this list.
Yeah, I mean, a name that jumps out at me, a guy that to me, BJ, it's almost shocking that he's not in. LeVar Arrington. Like, I mean, I thought that he would already be in right now, but you kind of see why, the College Football Hall of Fame got. You talk about, having your pick of the litter, but you like, dude, a lot of somebodies are not going to make it in. All these guys are obviously college Football Hall of Fame worthy, but that don't mean you're going to get. I mean, Reggie Bush. I mean, I thought he would. He changed the way I looked at the running back position. I mean, Sean Alexander. You talking about these great running backs at Alabama? Well, he's in there. He's got to be in the discussion to be able to say he started it all. But yeah, Kevin. I mean, I wouldn't want to listen. I'm always critical of these committees that got to vote these guys in. I would not want to be on the College Football Hall of Fame.
I mean, guys, Julius Peppers, Marshawn Lynch, Herman Moore. This is just Troy Vincent. I mean, it's incredible, the names on this list.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like they should be College Football Hall of Famers or something. But no, I mean,
okay.
Well, I mean, it is. Like if the list was unimpressive, I'd be like, okay, obviously some people need to re-examine where they're at. But yeah, I mean, this is a who's who of college football players and great careers. I think when you start to look forward to some of the things of guys who aren't going to get in, that's where it becomes very interesting because some of the criteria that has to be met when you're talking about getting into the College Football Hall of Fame. But yes, I mean, I think Champ Bailey, yes. Garrison Hurst, yes, probably will get in at some point. I think when you get into things like this and you start to dissect careers, it gets really tough because a lot of these guys are deserving of being in the College Football Hall of Fame. But I mean, there's a real chance that some of these guys may never get there, no matter how many ballots you put them on, and have been great. But I mean, you look at Champ Bailey and what he meant to Georgia during his time, a guy that came in and played multiple positions. I think really one of the first guys that we'd seen that played kind of like wide receiver, quarterback, running back, potentially returner. Like he kind of did everything, and you hadn't really seen a lot of that in college football. So to me, I think he makes just absolute sense. Now, when you start saying, hey, how do you stack up your vote to wait it out? I think that's where it becomes a little bit trickier when you talk about some of the guys that are also on the list. But yeah, I mean, just an impressive list of College Football Hall of Famers. And I'm sure when this day comes around in 2022, we'll be going, oh my gosh, you look at the list of names on this thing. It's incredible. Of course, they're Hall of Fame worthy. I mean, I think you kind of, more than anything else, remember some of those guys. And I think to me, it's that gut test, BJ, where you kind of look at if you are on a list and you are a name among names. Again, all these guys are very good. Where do you stack when you start reading all these names? Perfect example. Toby Gerhart, great player there at Stanford. But when you put him up against just the guys that are right next to him, Willie Gault, Tony Gonzalez, I mean, it's like, is he in the same breath as those guys? I don't think that he is. So I think that's where it gets to be very interesting when you start parsing all these lists down to get to a final vote.
No, and to your point, I mean, Champ Bailey, Reggie Bush. I mean, you see those names. And to your point about Champ and Reggie Bush, you talk about being sort of pioneers with how you play and innovators in terms of how you impact the game. I know we've all said before with the NFL Hall of Fame, right? You ask the question because stats, it's hard to only use stats, right? And then we've talked about that. But we say, can you tell the story of the position without the guy? If you you cannot talk about college running backs without talking about Reggie Bush. You cannot talk about college, playmakers, corners without talking about Champ Bailey. I mean, is that a fair metric for the College Hall of Fame as well, y'all think?
I think it is. I don't think it's the only reason too, BJ. I mean, sometimes you got to, you show how great of a player you were and you weren't at the big time, division in the schools we used to, like the usual suspects. The guy that jumps out on the list for me, Antoine Randall El was incredible at Indiana. I think he was a Heisman Trophy candidate. I mean, I remember Rashawn Salam at Colorado. I mean, you got some guys on here. I mean, BJ, and the most egregious on this list, it is not LeVar Arrington. It is Peter Warrick. I don't think people understand what Peter Warrick meant to the receiver position. Small guy. I mean, the original people think the Wildcat or all these type of things got started with Darren McFadden. No, they did it with P-Dub, just snapped the ball right to him. And you talk about what Champ Bailey did. Well, P-Dub did it. I mean, he was all everything. Go back to that, was it that Sugar Bowl or whatever, BJ's national championship?
99, yep.
All I'm saying is most receivers will only be Heisman Trophy candidates. They're not going to win it. P-Dub, because of an off-the-field situation, did not win it because of that. If he doesn't miss any games or because of that nonsense, he wins the Heisman. And you want to go back to that draft? I think, Courtney Brown was number 1. LeVar Arrington was number 2. Chris Sanders, I think, was number 3. P-Dub was number 4. P-Dub should have already been in. So some of these guys I thought was already in, but you see, like Kevin said, you see who these guys are around, BJ, and that's what make this list hard to vote them in. But hey, I'm wishing for the best for all these guys, but this list is serious.
Yeah, glad that task falls on somebody else to make those determinations, and not necessarily me having to vote on 70 different guys to figure out who gets in and maybe who has to wait another year. We've got so much to get to here on the show. We'll come back. Jake Crane, host of the J-Boy Show, will join us. We're talking college football with him. He had some very definitive statements about Kirby Smart after what transpired yesterday in Athens, saying, quote, Kirby, you got to win it this year. There's no more excuses. You are looking like the most complete team in college football, end quote. So we'll ask him about exactly that when we come back. It's 3 and Out all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. We are streaming live at ESPNCoastal.com. Big day in Athens yesterday for Kirby Smart as he got the dead period over and had 200 some odd recruits there in Athens, but got two big transfers coming in. And a lot of people saying that has stemmed the tide for Georgia here going into to 2021, including our next guest who said, quote, Kirby, you got to win it this year. There are no more excuses. You are looking like the most complete team in college football. He's Jake Creighton of the J-Boy Show, and he joins us here on 3 and Out. Jake, welcome. How are you? Jake, can you hear us?
Hey, guys, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. We've got you up. And
hey, awesome. It was kind of breaking up, and now it's great to hop on here. I appreciate y'all having me on, and yeah, what a day yesterday for Georgia.
We'll speak to that. Obviously, you made a statement. Basically, it's on Kirby to win it now. No excuses. Hasn't it not been like that with him already? I mean, what did two players make to make you say that?
I haven't been in the crowd of, Georgia's going to win it for the past 4 years. There's been a lot of people saying that. This is actually the first year. And before they got these transfers in the past couple days, I was saying that. But now, look, I do want to make a distinction here. The narrative that Kirby Smart is Mark Richt, I think, is laughable at best. Just look at the track records. I know Kirby has to get over that hump, and I think he will. I think he's going to be the first assistant to beat Saban. But this year, combined with what Alabama's replacing, even though they're replacing with the best talent in the country, Georgia now adding Kendrick to the secondary, adding Turnage to the secondary, adding Tyke Smith to the secondary, and now getting Eric Gilbert as another weapon for Todd Monken and JT Daniels. That roster, physically, athletically, and depth, to me, has a legitimate shot to win the national championship.
Well, I mean, we'll start right there or continue right there. When you think about Georgia, could you make an argument they should be preseason number one over an Alabama or a Clemson?
Yeah, I think you could if you're looking at the rosters. Now, we all know what, preseason rankings mean and all that stuff, and it's hard to go against what Nick Saban's done and what Dabo's done, especially being in the ACC, where it's a little bit different than being in the SEC. But no, I would have no problem with that. I think they have a legitimate chance to win it. I love what they can do up front defensively, and I'm a big fan of Matt Luke and what he can do for the offensive line. I mean, Amarius Mims is about as good a looking as a prospect to tackle coming out of high school as you're ever going to see, and he's going to get coached up from Matt Luke. So, I would not go against that, and I would actually think that makes a lot of sense.
And Jake, I mean, you think about a guy like Eric Gilbert, I mean, his ability. Obviously, they already put out there he's going to be probably playing the X position. I mean, definitely has the skill set to go out there and do it. What type of weapon is Georgia getting with a guy who obviously you happy that he's able to find a home with everything he was dealing with his family. But what type of skill set do he bring to the table, and how much more dangerous does he make this already potent Georgia offense?
Yeah. No, it's a great question, and I'm going under the auspices that he will be eligible, and if he is eligible, I want to make sure Georgia fans and SEC fans understand this guy isn't coming in to play an inline tight end. They're not going to put him in the hip and have him go kick out somebody on split zone or go hit the mic on insert or anything like that. I think they're going to move him from the outside wide receiver position. I think he can play slot. He's a guy that can block out there if that's something he wants to do, and if he can get his mind right off the field, it adds a huge weapon. I mean, a huge security blanket for JT Daniels. It's a matchup nightmare. What are you going to do? Put a nickel on him in the red zone and let him just throw jump balls or throw the corner and let Eric just out rebound you basically and get the ball. But also his run after the catch. The ability on 3rd and 8 to catch a 5-yard hitch, break a tackle, and get 4 more yards and get the first down. Those are the little things. Darnell Washington is going to be a big-time inline tight end at 6'7", 280, whatever he is. He's going to be more of your bruiser and interior guy. But adding that to JT Daniels, who's already, in my opinion, one of the top quarterbacks in the country, with an offensive line that I think is going to be pretty daggum good. And now, even without George Pickens, you look at Blaylock, you look at Burton. On the outside there, Kyrus Jackson. Georgia's going to be a problem on offense, and I think Todd Monken is finally a guy that Kirby Smart can relax a little bit and say, hey, go get this money.
And Jake, you look at Georgia here, would you feel even stronger about it if Clemson wasn't the first game? I mean, obviously the chemistry has to come together pretty quick here with these new guys coming into the secondary for game number 1 against Clemson.
Yeah, well, if you want to win the whole thing, you're probably going to have to play them eventually. You might as well catch them week 1. I'm not in love with these neutral site games like being in Charlotte. I just understand why we can't play home and home. It's what makes college football great, but that's neither here nor there. First world problems, I guess. But listen, I think, Georgia's got enough experience and older guys where they're not going to freak out playing Clemson game one. And it's a great litmus test. I mean, and if you're Georgia, the greatest part about it is you can lose that game and still have a good chance to make the playoff. If you're Clemson, it's the same thing because they're going to roll through the ACC again. I don't believe anybody is going to give them any competition in that league. But it's a good litmus test. And think of the momentum that you could get if you're Georgia. You've done really well in the portal. There's a ton of hype in the offseason. We know Georgia typically doesn't handle hype very well, but you go out and knock off Clemson, who there's some questions there. They lost a bunch on defense. I like the DJ kid at quarterback. I'm not going to attempt to say his last name because I'm going to screw it up. But I like what he brings, but I don't know if he's 100% ready. And I think they're catching Clemson at the perfect time. So I actually look at it the other way. I think it's a good litmus test, and I think Georgia's going to beat them.
Wow. To ask another question about the schedule, though, if you look at it as, hey, you get Clemson early and that's a great opportunity, is it also a challenge in the sense that as good as Georgia might be, and they're probably going to be top 3 in the country, given the way the playoff has unfolded in the past, Georgia's probably going to have to beat one of Clemson or let's just assume for sake of argument, Alabama in the SEC championship game to get into the playoff. Even if you're as good on paper as Georgia is that still just an incredibly high mountain to scale when you think about having to beat one of those two teams?
Yeah, well, I kind of look at it like this. You get over the hump and you beat Clemson, now you can eat a loss to Alabama in the SEC championship, and you're probably still getting in the playoffs. So you almost, and again, you've got to win the games in between. It's not going to be a cakewalk. We know how tough the SEC is, and it's only getting better. But I kind of look at it as a way, if you lose that game and then you go into the Alabama SEC championship game, it does turn into a must-win, but it really just comes down to how you do in the first one. So it's kind of just how you want to look at it. I'm the type of, you beat Clemson, it's like buying insurance almost to get in the playoff. That's the way that I see it. But again, it's kind of the glass half full, glass half empty way to look at it. And listen, they're going to have to beat Bama eventually. If not in the SEC championship game, maybe in the national championship game. So at some point, they're going to have to beat Alabama, and not just for the first half.
Jake, I mean, on paper, obviously one team has already played. Better Georgia team on paper. 2021 Georgia or 2018 Georgia?
Man, that is a great question. It's hard for me to answer because I just haven't seen them all on the field together. And you know as well as I do, you can have a bunch of talented players, but if you can't get them to coalesce on the field, it can turn ugly really quick. Ask the Lakers. But, right now, man, I'd take 2021 Georgia.
Wow. Jake Crane joining us, host of the J-Boy Show here on 3 and Out. And you look at the expectations there at Georgia. I mean, they're not going anywhere anytime soon, obviously, with the way Kirby Smart recruits. Is it national championship or bust from like here on out for Kirby Smart? I'm not even talking about this year. Is it next year? Like, is that where the level is right now?
Yeah, well, I think since Kirby's gotten there, he's elevated the way we talk about Georgia. Not that Georgia hasn't always been relevant, but they haven't won a national championship since 1980, and I can understand the sentiment from Georgia fans of wanting to get over that. They've done basically everything else. You've had your number one recruiting class. You were one play away from winning the national championship. You've won the SEC. You've hit all these different markers. But yeah, Kirby's got to win the big one to get over the hump. But again, he has positioned Georgia to be able to do that every year. This isn't a once in a 3 years thing. I think they're going to win it. I think it's his best chance to win it. He's got to win it eventually. But if he doesn't win it this year, I want to caution Georgia fans. Don't get out over your skis. You can ask Tennessee fans about Philip Fulmer what happens when you start getting a little bit too big for your britches. And Kirby is building this thing to last. They are putting multiple top 3, top 2, number 1 ranked recruiting classes together. And when you do that, you continue to keep yourself in the conversation. And Georgia's one of the 5 or 6 teams we talk about always making the playoffs. So it's going to happen eventually. I think it happens this year. I think he's going to be the first assistant of Saban to beat him. But if it doesn't happen this year, we're going to be talking about him again in some capacity next year. I'd be willing to bet.
How much of the pressure to win a national championship when you think about Georgia and Kirby Smart isn't just 1980, but when you look over the last 25 years, there's Alabama, there's Auburn, there's Florida, there's LSU, there's Tennessee, that Georgia's rivals are winning national titles, and though they've been close, they haven't.
Yeah, and the best way I can put it is when you look at Georgia and what they've done, it's been amazing. They just got one mountain to climb. I mean, it's it's nice to go to the dance, but it's nice to be the prettiest girl at the dance every once in a while. And for guys that have grown up, being Georgia fans and falling it diehards, just like you got at Auburn, just like you got at Florida, just like you got at Alabama, they feel like they're owed one. They haven't got to see it. I mean, you got guys that are, 40 years old that have never seen, Georgia win a national championship in football, and Georgia's fan base is deserving of it. They're as deserving as anybody. So the pressure's, it's paramount, and you're always going to feel it, but it comes with the job at a place like Georgia. And if you're Kirby, the way you got to look at it, I'm sure he does, is, well, I've built our expectations up enough where a national championship is the standard, and it doesn't relieve any pressure until you win it. And then guess what? There's more pressure to win it again, because you get a taste of it one time, you want a taste of it the second time.
I mean, Jake, when I think about the quarterbacks that came through Georgia, I mean, some big name guys. Aaron Murray did the air raid. David Green was one of the best guys I've seen come through there. Matthew Stafford was the number 1 overall pick. You telling me that Georgia's finally going to win a national championship, and the guy that's going to lead them is from California?
Well, Alabama's hoping a guy that went to the same school in California can do the same thing with Bryce Young. I don't know if a lot of people know that him and JT played at the same high school at Mater Dei out there, which is a great program, produces a ton of Division I athletes in a really good area for football. But yeah, and again, it's not, listen, we can make it about the quarterback, and we all know how important the quarterback is. But I think since Georgia shored up that secondary with the front seven, what they got, with guys like Jordan Davis up front and Adam Anderson that can come off the edge and play that nickel or star or outside back or whatever you want to call it, I love the depth they have. And they've done a really good job, and Alabama has too, of surgically using the portal to hit the places they needed the most. It's almost like playing the game of operation, and Georgia was able to get the bone out without hitting the side and ringing the buzzer. So, yeah, I think they're a complete team. I look at Georgia, and number one, if you look at them, physically, Georgia looks different than most people. There's not a lot of teams that getting off the bus look the way that Georgia does, from the starters through the third string, and that's how you win in this league, not with your first 22, but with your first 44.
Jake Crain, host of the J-Boy Show, joining us here on 3 and Out. Jake, we appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Awesome, guys. Always appreciate it. Y'all stay good. And, hey, remember, I called Georgia winning it when they do on ESPN Coastal.
Hey, we've got it written down, ready to go. Jake Crain joining us here.
All right, and if they don't, forget I said it and delete the clip. But anyway,
absolutely.
Y'all be good.
We're well aware with that, with our takes here on the show. Appreciate it. Jake Crain joining us. Again, he says, look, got to win it this year. And BJ been really since yesterday, once they got those 2 commits, we've seen a lot, not just from Jake, but a number of people have said, boy, this really amps it up on Georgia to be the team to beat. You said, hey, I think you said on the show yesterday, BJ, top 1 or 2 potentially preseason in college football. I mean, I would answer with what I just asked him. Hasn't that necessarily been the case? I mean, that's been the case since Kirby Smart kind of showed up. It's like, hey, we brought Kirby in to win national championships because Mark Richt was only winning 10 and 11 games.
I think you can make the argument, at least, and it's hard to say things kind of with great conviction when you're making comparisons, like Jake said, about a team you haven't seen yet. But on paper, this team is really complete. When you talk about kind of the proven production, the experience, the additions yesterday obviously help, and it kind of looks like a national championship type team, like what Alabama has, like what Clemson has. I do think the schedule is tricky because we have not yet seen a 2-loss team, right, in the college football playoff. Obviously, it's impossible to predict what's going to happen this season, but I think it would make sense if you just go off past results that, hey, 2 losses, you're probably going to be on the outside looking in. That means Georgia's going to have to beat one of Clemson or Alabama, assuming they go undefeated the rest of the way. And look, Florida's going to be ready. Auburn's going to be ready. I mean, the SEC is still the SEC, but I just think that's a really high standard. If you were to just reverse it, and look, Clemson is a current dynasty, but if you were to kind of reverse the schedules right now and say, hey, Georgia's going to play Clemson's schedule, but, play obviously Clemson in week 1. I think if Georgia were to lose to Clemson, you would look the rest of the way if Georgia had an ACC schedule and say they're going to be favored by at least 10 points in every single game. And even in the ACC championship game, in this theoretical comparison, I think Georgia would be favored by at least a touchdown over North Carolina or Miami potentially. Whereas even if the SEC regular season schedule isn't as tough as it has been or isn't the toughest schedule in the country, you probably know Alabama's waiting for you at the end of the year. So what's interesting to think about is, could Georgia be the 3rd best team in the country and be in a big three that is considerably better than everybody else. Like, could you envision a scenario where the three best teams in the country by far are Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, but because Georgia has losses to potentially the number 1 and 2 team, they're not in the playoff? I think that's the scenario that worries you with the schedule.
Well, I mean, isn't that fair though? I mean, when you think about the fact that every time we put out the schedule each year, 8 to 10 teams got a shot to even go to the college football playoff before we even kick the ball off. And Georgia's always one of those teams. The thing about what I don't like about it, national championship or bust, you be like, based off of what? Like, I understand that you got the players. I understand that you got the culture in a sense. I understand that you got the coaches and the resources. We've seen Clemson do it. We've seen Alabama do it. Ohio State is going to get there. Oklahoma's going to be scratching the claw to be that 4th team, right? I'm not saying Georgia don't got what it takes to do it, but based off of what? Because BJ, we say, yeah, you just got to beat Clemson, Alabama. Okay. I mean, and I understand Jake saying they getting Clemson at the right time. I don't think nobody's ever said that. It's getting Clemson at the right time. All I'm saying is when it comes to Georgia, yes, that narrative is going to always be out there. And this notion of if we keep on banging at the door, we're going to eventually knock it down. Well, what if it's reinforced with Alabama and Clemson on the back of it? I'm just saying that's what you got. That's what you're trying to knock down. So I just think too. When's the last time Georgia went undefeated in the SEC? Because if they lose to Clemson, that's what they're going to have to do. So a lot's on the line, and the only people talk about wanting to play these teams. Well, analysts and coaches. These players were like, dude, why we got to get Clemson? Because, see, when they schedule Clemson, they didn't know that Clemson will be this Clemson, right? So we'll see what happens, but that's why you get paid what you get paid to coach at the place you coach at. But Kirby Smart understands that he understands what's at stake, but I just think that schedule and your first game is Clemson and your consolation prize is Alabama, good luck with that.
Hey, well, the expectations aren't going down. That's for sure. We've got more to come here on 3 and Out all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Great to be here on this Wednesday. Rich Styles will join us coming up next hour. We'll talk some golf with him, including the Bryson Brooks Koepka rivalry out there. Also, Jake Rue set to join us a little bit later in the show. Top of hour number 3, we'll look at Georgia and their big day yesterday with him. But some breaking news from earlier this afternoon, BJ and Ben. Coach K calling it a career after this next go through of the college basketball season. So 2021, 2022 will be his last in college basketball.
Yeah, one of the all-time greats, one of the best to ever do it. You think about his resume, what he's accomplished, and I think that was, people knew we were kind of getting closer to the end, but I don't know if that was necessarily anticipated. So maybe some surprising news to a certain extent about one of the all-time greats today.
Yeah, I mean, that's huge news, Coach K. I mean, I don't know if anybody's meant more to one school than Coach K has, but it's gonna be sad to see him on the sidelines, Kevin. But at the end of the day, the evil empire in basketball will continue to move on no matter what. But we will miss Coach K.
That's a debate for later in the show. I don't know if is that true. I mean, if without Coach K, does it go a different direction? I mean, very interesting. We'll debate that. I'll try to find some time later in the show to do that. We're up against it right now. It's 3 and Out. All across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Hit us up on Twitter at Pigskin Radio. You can find us streaming live at espncoastal.com. Also live on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. You can comment there in the comment section as well. We'll take 3 when we return here on 3 and Out. Hour 2, 3 and out here on this Wednesday. Kevin, BJ, and Ben, glad you were with us all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. We'll hear from Rich Stiles here in hour number 2. Also, we'll look at Dan Mullen. Got a contract extension, but seems to be two schools of thought on whether or not Florida should have done that or not. We'll get to that coming up in about 30 minutes on the program. And, of course, we mentioned last hour, Coach K retiring, not going to be back at Duke after this upcoming season, but kind of been open up the interesting debate. We'll get to that later this hour. Is Duke still Duke? Minus Coach K. We'll get to that later this hour. But first, it's 4 o'clock. Let's take 3 here on 3 and Out. All right, fellas, take 1. NBA playoffs. Last night, Dame Lillard hit a playoff record 12 three-pointers in Portland's 2 overtime loss to Denver. What is the best performance you've ever seen in a loss?
All right, I'm going to go in person, never seen in person, and that is 2009. The ACC championship game was in Tampa, and it was Clemson and Georgia Tech. And Georgia Tech actually won the game 39-34. Really fun game, back and forth game. But in that contest, CJ Spiller was voted the game MVP. He had 20 carries for 233 yards and 4 touchdowns. Also had a catch, also had a long kick return. So being there in Tampa, I think it was a rainy night, but that was a fun game between Georgia Tech and Clemson. Georgia Tech won the ACC championship game. CJ Spiller was the MVP, going for 233 and 4 touchdowns. That was absolutely amazing.
I'm gonna go to a series, and I mean I know this guy inspired a lot of players in the NBA right now to be themselves. I'm gonna go Allen Iverson. I mean that 2001 Finals against the Lakers. I mean I think he might have won the MVP. That might have been his MVP season, but I mean I think he averaged almost 37 a game in the playoffs. I think he went for over 40 like 4 or 5 times, over 50 like 2 times. I mean what? 6 feet, 160 pounds, 70 pounds, and he's the best player on the court. Now, obviously, he can't do nothing against Shaq and Kobe, but to know he took that Philadelphia 76ers team to the finals, I mean, when people say he had nobody, he had nobody. But for him to have the performance he had, you knew he wasn't going to win it. But just like Trae Young became a superstar, he's becoming a superstar right now, I believe that pushed AI into superstardom when you saw what he did, against the Lakers teams that went back to back to back. 2001 AI for me.
Yeah, all good ones. I will say, John Smoltz, Game 7 of the World Series against Jack Morris, went 9 innings, gave up no runs, and they ended up losing in the 10th inning, 1-0. So I would say John Smoltz in Game 7. If you get through 9 and give up no runs and lose in Game 7 of the World Series, that's pretty tough to take the loss at that point. So. John Smoltz definitely up there. And you see it in football a lot where dudes will have, 300, 400, 500 yards passing and they don't win. I mean, how many times did Washington State have like a quarterback throw for 600 yards and not win?
I mean, did you see what Cody shared on the chat there, Ben?
Look,
say it.
I'm not even gonna look at the end of the day. Yes, I mean I had a pretty good game against them boys from Tallahassee my senior year in the Swamp, but we know how that ended up. When old Chris Ricks was like, "Oh, I'm gonna throw it up to my homeboy." At the end of the day, I mean I shout out to the Florida State boys for getting it done. That was a fun game for me. Mickey Andrew, the great Mickey Andrew, the greatest defensive coordinator in Florida State history, came up to me after the game and said, "Young man." I'm so happy we only got to play you once a year. So, I mean, hey, got a chance.
Dude, you averaged 30 yards per catch. You averaged 30 yards per catch and had the go-ahead touchdown with what, like 50 seconds remaining?
Yeah, but I dropped one too. So let's just talk about. I mean, and to me, that's football, right? It's not what you did. It's what you didn't do. Yeah, I had 2 touchdowns. I also dropped one, and when I dropped it, I wish that the game would have just been postponed. Right? Listen, due to the inclement weather, we can no longer. I just laid it on the ground, but I had fun that game, man. We just came out on losing it.
A lot of great performances from guys that don't win in the end. Moving along, take 2. Bigger impact for Georgia, Gilbert or Kendrick? Obviously, the 2 transfers that Georgia landed yesterday.
Yeah, both guys stars. I think for me, Derion Kendrick, because he's a cornerback one right now, and he's been that for a couple of years at Clemson. You go back to 2019, Clemson was number 2 in the nation in opponent quarterback rating. So you're talking about a secondary that was just elite, and Kendrick was a big part of that. This is a guy that's won a national championship. This is a guy that's been all ACC not once but twice. This is a guy that I believe it's USA Today, one of the recent mock drafts that has been posted for 2022 has him going in the first round. 6 foot 190, so kind of a bigger corner that could possibly match up with the bigger receivers. And look at what Georgia lost to the draft at corner. I mean, you're talking about what, 4 or 5 pro guys. So you had questions there. And it's not that the other guys aren't talented. Look, Georgia has talent at every single position, including at corner, but the experience wasn't there. And now you bring in one of the best corners in the country, a guy that is going to be your number one, and you got to have that number one because everybody's got a big-time receiver or multiple big-time receivers these days in college football. So both guys are incredible additions, but I think Derion Kendrick, and you play his old team right away in a showcase, in an absolute game of the year type contest right away. But I think it's the cornerback Kendrick coming in right away and just leading the way defensively.
I mean, for me, it's probably going to be Gilbert because he's going to get more opportunities because he's probably going to be the number 2 if he is eligible. But I think you're going to need to beat Kendrick because you're going to need to be, like you said, BJ, to be able to shut down the opposing team's number 1 receiver, and the rest of your defense just go out there and do their exotic things to be able to put pressure on the opposing offense. I think that's going to be your best bet. I mean, Gilbert, think about it. I mean, the guy has the skill set to go out there and get it done. He's not replacing George Pickens. He's just a great substitute. He's not replacing this man by no way, shape, or imagination. But for Georgia as a team, you're going to need to be Kendrick because whenever you can take away another team's number 1 threat, that's huge in all levels, high school, college, and pro. So for me, probably going to be Gilbert, but for Georgia, they're going to need to be Kendrick.
Yeah, I think Kendrick is the guy that's going to come in and play from day one, and that is, to me, that's the bigger impact. Right there, first game, 100% no, you got to have him game 1 out of the gate there against Clemson. Moving on to take 3, if the Hogs could bring in any player from any era of the NBA to be an enforcer in tonight's game, who would you pick?
All right. When I think enforcer, I'm thinking about, yes, you're big and physical, and you're setting the screens, and you're bodying people. But look, man, if you can grab 30 rebounds and, drop 45, that helps too. So I'm going with Shaq. Just give me Shaq. Shaq's going to be an enforcer on the floor. He's also going to dominate. He's also going to draw attention. And he's 7 foot 325, the most unstoppable force maybe in basketball history. So I understand you guys have other picks, but I'm going with Shaq. Just give me Shaq.
We need an enforcer. We need a guy who don't have to score buckets. We need a guy that's only out there to show, listen, I'm going to show you, you know what I'm going to get rebounds, set screens, and enforce my will. That's Ben Wallace. Ben Wallace, he's going to the Hall of Fame because he did better than anybody in the league. Think about it. I am in the NBA not to score but to rebound, and to be an enforcer on the other end and to be a defensive pest. I love Beanie Wallace. From back in the day, Wallace twice on Sunday.
Yeah, if I'm enforcer, when I hear the word enforcer, I don't care what else you can do. I don't care if you can score a basket. I don't care if you can, dribble the basketball, rebound, and just body people and foul. It's got to be, for me, Bill Laimbeer or Dennis Rodman. Really, I'll take anybody off the Bad Boy Pistons, but if I had to pick one, I would say Bill Laimbeer because, again, go back and watch the Jordan Chronicles or go back and watch any of those old Celtics Pistons documentaries or like Bill Laimbeer was there to hit people in the chest and say, you're not coming into paint.
Okay, I understand that, Kev, but what I'm saying is if you're Shaq and you get the ball in the paint and you turn around and you dunk on somebody and you rip the backboard off, is that not being an enforcer as well?
No, that's being a good dominant player. Enforcer is a guy who is there to shut down the other team from doing what they want to do by physical means. That's the way I see it.
I think Shaq did that. That's all I'm saying.
You have enforcers in hockey. It's if you're an enforcer in hockey, you're literally not out there to try to score a goal. You're there to go knock people all over the ice. That's your whole job.
I get it. I'm just saying my guy can be the traditional enforcer and go for like 40 and 30 if he needs to.
No, I want a guy that's punching dudes in the face. Give me Bill Laimbeer. That's take 3. We do it each and every day here. This time we've got Rich Stiles waiting around the corner. Speaking of enforcer, we'll ask him about the Bryson Brooks Koepka rivalry. What's the big deal there, and does that actually have potential legs to it in terms of folks wanting to see these two go back and
okay,
forth?
but I know you like a good rivalry. Before we get to Rich, is this good for golf in your mind?
Do I think it is? Yes, because again, you're spending a lot of time trying to find the next Tiger. No, you just need good storylines. And if you have a Batman, you need a Joker. If you have, you need somebody that cuts against the grain. And the fact that you have two guys that at least one guy pretty openly annoyed with the other guy, that makes for great drama. That makes for great television. I mean, part of as I was telling somebody the other day, when Phil Mickelson won, everyone's like, oh, man, he's not Tiger Woods. And I was like, well, if everybody was Tiger, there would be no Tiger Woods. So for every Tiger Woods, you need a Phil Mickelson that's not as fiery, that cuts against the grain. So I think Bryson and Brooks Koepka, to me, could be one of those things where it's like, look, I don't really care what level of golf they're playing at. I just know these two cats don't like each other. So give me all that. Pair them together. First round of a major. Let them go out there and play. Do it. And just watch the angst. I mean, anytime you can play stuff like that up, I think it's great. It doesn't mean it has to come to fisticuffs, but I mean, you need a hero and an anti-hero, no matter what side of it you're on. I mean, there are people that like Tiger and Phil that like both of them, but if you're like the pro Phil guy, you probably grade a little bit against Tiger. If you're the pro Tiger guy, you probably grade a little bit against Phil. It's fine. That's how rivalries work, man. Somebody's got to be on both sides. So I think it's good. And again, I think instead of just trying to find the next Tiger, find some compelling stories out there, guys that don't like each other. That's what I always tell people about NASCAR. NASCAR was great until they took the NASCAR out of NASCAR, which was what? Dudes fighting each other, dudes bumping each other on the track, wrecking each other, talking junk after the race about how they're stupid. And all that is good. All that is good. And you legislated it out of your sport for the corporatization of it. That's why people watch, because that dude doesn't like that dude. And that's it. It's that simple. And I think golf could stand some of that there in the week to week. We'll ask Rich about that when we come back. It's 3 and Out all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Great to be here with you on this Wednesday. Kevin, BJ, and Ben on 3 and Out. Hit us up on Twitter at Pigskin Radio. Love for you to be a part of the show. Plenty to come here, including we'll talk about Dan Mullen, who just got a contract extension there at Florida. Should he have, though? I will talk about that coming up in just a little bit. But first, joining us as he does each week on the show, host of the Back Nine Boys Golf Show, Rich Stiles, stepping in here on 3 and Out. Rich, welcome. How are you?
Doing wonderful, guys. Hope you are too.
We are doing fantastic. Of course, we are out from Phil Mickelson winning the PGA Championship, but we didn't get a chance to ask you about the match, which is going to have Phil and Tom Brady versus Bryson DeChambeau and Aaron Rodgers. I mean, we've seen some pre-smack talk, I guess, back and forth on this, but I know we've asked you about the Phil Tiger showdown and all that. Does this have legs? I mean, are people going to get fired up about this?
I don't think so. I'm not fired up about it, but I'm not your typical golf watcher. I think it's one of those made for TV shows. And, I think Bryson and Phil, Brady, they're all great in their sports, as well as Rodgers, but this is a made for TV thing. I mean, they've got a sponsor. They're all going to play each other. It just doesn't have what I think it needs, which is a little bit of excitement, mystery. It's just four guys who are professional athletes that are playing golf. You're going to hear some trash talking, I'm sure, but I would rather see DeChambeau and Koepka.
And Rich, you mentioned those two guys. Obviously, there have been storylines there. A couple of questions here. Why do Bryson and Brooks not get along? And is their rivalry, if you want to call it that, good for golf?
Is it good for golf? Heck yeah. Golf, as Kevin was saying a few minutes ago, golf doesn't have a lot of controversy as far as players playing against each other. Remember, there was a controversy way back early when Tiger and Phil, when they were younger, that they didn't get along. And, at times they tried to put them together to play, and there wasn't a lot of things going on. But this Bryson and Koepka thing, I think it's kind of funny in a way, because basically you got a guy, Koepka, who's no drama, kind of a militaristic way of going about his day and his game and so on and so forth. And then you got DeChambeau, who's drama-filled. He's almost like a reality show within himself. And he loves the drama. He loves the media. He loves to, kind of play with them a little bit like, well, on this hole, I may go over here and I may go over there. And, even though it may be out of bounds, I think I can handle that. So I think it's just kind of funny to see these two guys, very opposites, both, big guys, big names in the golf game. And I really don't think they like each other.
I mean, and Rich, you say you love it, you think it's good for golf. Could this become more of a normal thing? I understand when you talk about the game of golf, it's about, professionalism, it's about guys going out there and showing why they are the best in the world. But is it okay to not be so buttoned up all the time? It's not like it's going to affect your game. I think it is good for golf, and I hope to see more of it.
Hey, golf is one of those games where the guys are taught by the sports psychologists not to show emotion. When they get a triple bogey, a double bogey, when they hit the ball in the water, when they get a birdie, when they save a par, you don't see much reaction on many of the golfers out there because, they don't want to show so much emotion. And, I kind of like seeing some emotion. A win is a win. Winning $1 million, being able to earn your tour card, that's big. But I think it's good for golf. I think it's good for a controversy. There's always now going to be a story whenever those two are going to be in a tournament. Are they going to be paired together? Will they, go out to the, 7-Eleven and get some Slurpees together? Probably not. Will they share protein drinks and have two straws? No. But, I think it's interesting. We haven't seen a big controversy like this since Phil and Tiger when they were younger. Now they seem to get along a little bit better. But I think it's good for golf. I think I'd like to see more of this and see more emotion in the game of golf.
I was going to say, Rich, why do you think leagues kind of downplay some of that, especially when you don't have much of it in there to begin with. I mean, that's what people latch onto. I mean, was it Tiger I know you could say he didn't say much to the media, but he was fiery. He had, fist pumps. He would get after. He would say, doggone it, Tiger. I had to clean that up for radio. But after he hit a shot, he would go after folks, snapping the cameras. He kind of had a little bit of personality that you don't see from, 90% of the guys out there. Why wouldn't golf ask for more, at least a little bit more of that week to week on tour?
Well, I think they go through so much with their coaches where, they're conditioned to not show emotion or as much as they normally would, because then they get too emotionally involved in what just happened, and they need to be more focused on what's about to happen. So you forget about a double bogey or a three putt that you just had because you've got to drive a very narrow fairway right now. And some sports psychologists, tell them to play in 3 shots or 3 holes at a time. I'm going to play these 3 holes at 1 under or even par, or I'm going to try and hit the fairway, today. And so there's very small goals in between each one of these games. And mentally, these guys really, really get into it and really kind of go through the game shot by shot, hole by hole, or 3 holes at a time. And I just think that, the sports psychologists don't want them to get too emotionally drained because then it affects their focus ability. How about that for a quarter word? On the game of golf.
Rich, what do you expect to see up in Ohio the next couple of days with the Memorial Tournament presented by Nationwide?
Well, this is a huge tournament. I mean, just because it's up where it is at Muirfield, and it's Jack's tournament, and he's done some things new this year for the tournament. It's got to have a great field. There's some guys that just don't like the golf course, so they won't play it. But I think it's going to be a great field. I think you're probably everybody's probably saying who's going to win. Again, as we say every week, there's anywhere from 15 to 30 guys who could have 4 great rounds and come away with a big win. But it's Jack's tournament at Jack's place, and so the field is going to be a great field.
I mean, Rich, you keep on talking about these trainers and these caddies dealing with these golfers, talking about professionalism. I mean, it's been a little while since you and Christian had y'all challenge. What do you say to guys like Christian and myself, for whom we just trying to be the best golfers we can, and you out there beating the brakes off us? What would you tell us as far as like our mentality? How do we keep our spirits up?
Well, Christian talks a good game, and we had a lot of fun. There was not a lot of emotion, except the few times that he won a hole or hit a good shot. I mean, it was fun, but Christian likes to trash talk, and he said I practiced for a long time before we had our match. I didn't. I putted for a little bit, and then he showed up, and we both hit our first shots of the day off the tee. So that's probably about all I got to say about it.
I think Rich, basically what you're saying is he made excuses and you just said, hey, scorecard, I won. The end.
I didn't even have to say scorecard. It was just written in front of him.
Rich Stiles joining us here on 3 and Out. Rich, we haven't done this in a minute, but hey, it's starting to be summertime feel out there, so it's time for Rich Stiles with Rich Stiles. How do you stay cool out there on the golf course, looking nice in the summer months?
Well, you don't wear a lot of dark clothing. You wear, the new kind of clothing that's out there that washes easy and dries very easy, and also a transfusion somewhere during mid-round would make it very easy to forget about whatever you shot on the front and really not care what you're going to shoot on the back.
That's the best way to go about it, quite frankly. Rich Stiles, our guest here on 3 and Out. Rich, always a pleasure. Thanks so much.
Okay, guys, have fun.
We'll do. Rich Stiles, host of the Back Nine Boys Golf Show. You can hear Hit Rich and Harris English coming up this weekend there on the Back Nine Boys Golf Show. We'll come back. We'll talk some college football. Dan Mullen gets an extension, but a lot of people saying, baby, wasn't the right time to do that. We'll get to that next. It's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Welcome back. College football, just always in the news, always something to get after. We talked a lot about Georgia. We'll continue to talk about that with Jake Roos, UGAsports.com, top of the final hour here on the show. But another story broke yesterday that had a lot of folks kind of going back and forth on whether it was too soon or, hey, that's what you should do. And that was Dan Mullen, got a contract extension there with Florida. And obviously you have one side who was like, good, he just got to the SEC championship game, won the East. It was Alabama, no shame in that. Got to a New Year's Six bowl game, got it turned around pretty quick. Had, obviously a number of players drafted in the first round, number of players drafted, period, in the NFL draft. And other folks say, look, he just lost 4 straight games coming down the stretch, with including 3 in a row. What are you doing? Why are you giving out extensions prior to this? Where do you kind of land on this? We'll start with you, Ben, but where do you kind of land on this where people, obviously anytime you give a coach an extension, fans are either going to love it or hate it. But are you surprised, given where Florida was just 5-6 years ago, that coming off a trip to the SEC championship game, people are questioning giving the extension to Dan Mullen?
I'm not because the whole thing about it is Dan Mullen is under a different level of scrutiny than most coaches. I mean, yes, no, he has not, won the SEC championship game. No, he has not been in the college football playoff, but he inherited a mess. It's not like when he took over Florida, it was trending upward. I mean, Florida was a season removed. I think when he got there, was the season before, they didn't make a bowl game. They was losing by 21 in the first quarter to Georgia the previous year. Since then, right, they've won 2 New Year's Six bowls. They won the SEC East. They played Alabama the best during that time, and they got the brakes beat off them by Oklahoma. And I get that part. But the whole thing about it is Dan Mullen is the guy for the future. So you go ahead. How do you show people that the guy of the future? You give them money in the present. Dan Mullen seems to be a guy he got his money for 2 reasons. One, because when you look at what's going on around him, doesn't have a top 10 recruiting class. Might barely even scratch the top 15 when you talk about that. Alabama, Heisman Trophy finalist. Clemson, Heisman Trophy finalist. Georgia, nope. Tennessee, nope. South Carolina, nope. And it's easy to say that they were going to beat Georgia after they beat them. And in all SEC schedule, he won the East. That's got to mean something. So I do think that Dan Mullen obviously should get scrutinized for what he hasn't done, but let's not look past the fact that he's done a whole lot. The guy he recruited has not played football until now. He did it with Felipe. He did it with Kyle Trask. And I just think that when you look at what, Florida is always going to be that type of team to where it's going to be realistic or most of the time unrealistic expectation when you look at what's going on around them. But I think Dan Mullen is a better developer of talent than most people in the country. And I think the proof is in the pudding. Yes, you're going to have to get in the college football playoff. And yes, he's going to have to find a way to do better in recruiting. But the last time I checked, the team in Athens lost to the team, to the team from Gainesville last year. That's got to mean something. But I do agree, Kevin. It's always going to be scrutiny attached to it. I mean, almost $8 million a year is nothing to shy away from. But like I said, I mean, when you're doing what you're doing, despite not being a top 10 recruiting class, without running the football your first 2 years, really the first 3 years with your offense, yeah, I think Dan Mullen's always going to get, BJ scrutiny right, wrong, and different. Half because of what half because of what he doesn't do, and the other half because of where he coaches.
Yeah, but I'm still really surprised people aren't more appreciative of what he's done at Florida. And, you look at his winning percentage through the first 3 years. He's obviously been at Florida now 3 years. And how do you kind of frame success? Well, I think you can do it against your peers. Kirby Smart is generally regarded as one of the best coaches in the country. Kirby Smart, through his first 3 years at Georgia, won 76.1% of his games. Dan Mullen, through his first 3 years at Florida, has won 76.3% of his games. So technically, mathematically speaking, Dan Mullen has won a higher percentage of his games than Kirby Smart did 3 years through their respective stints at Florida and Georgia. And keep in mind that Dan Mullen did that with an all-SEC schedule last year. So if you were to just kind of think about it in regular terms, maybe that means 2 or 3 more wins for Florida and Dan Mullen a year ago. And even if you want to stretch it out to 2 of the all-time greats, Steve Spurrier and Urban Meyer. Steve Spurrier, through his first 3 years in Gainesville, 28-8. Urban Meyer, first 3 years in Gainesville, 31-8. Dan Mullen, first 3 years, 29-9. So he's right there. And again, that's with a year where you had an all-SEC schedule. If you assume that in a regular year, you would have 2 or 3 more wins because of the non-conference games. He has a better start to his career at Florida than Steve Spurrier and Urban Meyer. And it's just incredible. I mean, you mentioned that Dan Mullen took over a situation that wasn't great. Florida, you go back over the last decade before Mullen's arrival, and man, you're talking about not making a bowl game, losing to Georgia Southern. I mean, some really disappointing performances for the Gators, not having success against your rivals. And Dan Mullen inherited a situation where Jim McElwain won 64.7% of his games. Dan Mullen's won 76.3%. So he has immediately and considerably improved the status quo in Gainesville. And you just made the SEC championship game. And I know people will say, oh, well, you lost. You lost to Alabama 52-46. Like, that's what you want to fire a coach for or not give an extension for, because you lost by less than a touchdown to Alabama. And I obviously understand. And Kevin, I've long heard you talk about kind of the nature of recruiting rankings, and maybe we put a little too much emphasis on them. But I've long heard people say, oh, well, Dan Mullen's not an elite recruiter. He's not getting top 10 classes. His class was 12th last year. Like, are you really not wanting to extend a guy because his recruiting class was 12th and not 7th? In the country? I mean, to me, I just think that's a little much. And I went and looked right now. We're very early in recruiting for next year. Florida's 25th, okay, which is not necessarily elite, but they're also ahead of Clemson, Auburn, and Miami. Like, you don't evaluate recruiting classes in June. So Dan Mullen has won at a historic rate. Florida is one of the premier programs in the country. I think he's doing a really good job. This is a big year for him, yes, because you're right. When you're at Florida, when you're making $7 million a year, yeah, the expectations are there. But you have one of the best coaches in the country. The NFL, there was interest there, Kevin. I mean, I think it made sense to give him the extension and the raise.
Well, yeah, I mean, and again, I said this to you guys yesterday when you were telling me about some of the backlash. I was like, do people not forget, like, at one point, people were talking about Jim McElwain wrestling a shark, a photo that came, like that's what was news coming out of Gainesville was, hey, our coach maybe has lost it a little bit. And of course, didn't Jim McElwain, he like made up.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's what we were talking about. Made up the threads. And again, you're far away removed from that. Again, I think if you're expecting 12-0, or I guess now 15-0, every single year, it's not, to me, it's not going to happen. And I especially say that, I've long said this, BJ, you know this, like, if you're an SEC fan and you're going to sit there and thump your chest, like, we play in the SEC, it's the best conference in the world, you shouldn't expect to go 12-0 every year. If you do,
okay, but hold on, Kevin.
Obviously not the best conference.
Hold on. And I mean this with all due respect, because it's a valid point. Florida's one of the best programs in the history of college football. Florida's had some of the best players, some of the best coaches in the history of college football, and including you, Ben. And we talk about this all the time, how hard it is to go undefeated. Florida's never gone undefeated. In the history of Florida's program, they have never gone undefeated. Not with Steve Spurrier, not with Urban Meyer. And I'm not saying that shouldn't be the goal. Yes, everybody wants to win every game and win a national title. But it's kind of like this talk of Georgia better win a national title this year, or that's it. Florida, has to make the playoff, or that's it. So much goes into that. Like, so much goes into that. I just think that's a really hard barometer to have.
And the thing about it is, I mean, certain teams already got their branding, right? You know what their brand is. Like, it's almost like Georgia obviously wants to win a natty, right? But it's almost like, oh, they haven't won. Well, that's their brand. It doesn't take away from the fact they're still going to be top 1, top 2, top 3 in the country with recruiting. Florida can live off what it has been. Like, a lot of teams live off what they used to be. Oh, man, they're going to go back. Dan Mullen was the guy calling the plays with Tim Tebow did this. Urban Meyer was the head coach. So certain teams already got their branding, because the thing about it is BJ, something we talk about. We talk about greatness. Do we appreciate it? What Alabama's doing is greatness. What Clemson is doing is great. It might not be greatness, because greatness is an extended period of time when you're talking about what somebody's doing. So and Kevin, something to me, you talked about, I think on Friday, what's the best coaching job in America? It is Florida. This is the reason why. You're getting extensions, and you haven't had to do what some of these other. Dabo did not get an extension until he won a natty. Coach Orgeron was not getting no extension until after 2019. Well, and every time somebody gets an extension, Nick Saban gets an extension. Jimbo Fisher got his money based on what he done at Florida State. This guy's getting an extension. I mean, Dan Mullen's getting an extension based off going to back-to-back New Year's Six bowls putting on a Darth Vader outfit and calling this freaking team a B team. I'm telling you, you just want to be at a place that you are appreciated. And the fans going to be one thing. Dan Mullen, which is Dan Mullen hard to deal with? Yeah, probably is. I mean, I'm getting extensions when everybody else around me got to win that is to go to college football playoffs and win SEC championships. So you want to know what the best place to coach? It is Florida, because the expectation is one thing, but delivering on what you promised when you got it is another thing. Thus far, I think Dan Mullen has delivered, but that train has left the station. So I don't think that he's going to get the same benefit of the doubt now, because the problem with making millions, everybody knows you making them, and we all seem to think it's our money. We gave him 1.6.
No. Look, man, I hear you, but Kevin and I have long asked this. I mean, Kevin, even going back, to your starting radio, I used to hear you say this. It's like, okay, you want to fire Coach X, right? You want to fire this coach. What coach are you going to bring in? And that's my thing. Like, okay, Florida fans, you don't want Dan Mullen, or some fans don't, or national media or whatever. Okay, who is Florida getting in terms of its resume or their resume when you compare resumes to Mullen's that would be a clear upgrade over Dan Mullen?
I mean, I'm at a loss.
You got to live in the real world when you answer that.
And that's what I'm saying. It's like, look, 4 years ago, Dan Mullen got hired. The people are like, oh, they got Dan Mullen. You see what happened? What happened to Tennessee since then? How many coaches they done had? Since Dan Mullen's been hired, how many coaches that Tennessee had? Have you heard from UCLA? Have you heard from Coach Frost out there in Nebraska? See, just because a coach is good where they are, don't mean they're going to be good where they're going. I'm just saying, and sometimes, Scott Strickland, you know why Scott Strickland really hired Dan Mullen? Because he was an AD at Mississippi State. He had worked with him before. He just brought him over here. So I appreciate what Dan Mullen is doing. I don't like all the antics, but as long as production, elevates over, bad behavior, I can deal with it. Right now, it's doing it. But when they get to Jacksonville, we're gonna learn a lot, because he got it done last year. Last year was last year. He's gonna have to do it again.
We've got more to come. We'll look more at the college football coming up in the final hour. Jake Roos, UGAsports.com, will join us top of the final hour as well. It's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Great to be here on this Wednesday. Kevin, BJ, and Ben again earlier today. Mike Krzyzewski announcing his, not his retirement, but that 2021-2022 is going to be his last season. So Coach K stepping aside of this next season of college basketball. And we got kind of a debate going at the end of last hour. Wanted to continue there. Is Duke now Duke? I know to steal a famous like Pete Gillen quote, or is Duke Mike Krzyzewski? Obviously, meaning once he steps aside, is Duke still Duke? Like, you know, Kansas basketball, it kind of doesn't matter. I shouldn't say it doesn't matter, but it's like they're going to be good, right? Kentucky basketball has had coach after coach after coach after coach. Kentucky basketball is good. Is Duke still Duke without Coach K?
I mean, I think to a certain extent, the standard has been established. You know, Ben, you talk about all the time with college programs, tradition and history. That's not going anywhere. I mean, clearly, look, I don't think Duke is going to go from being a national title contender to being like one of the bottom teams in the ACC. But do I think it's reasonable and fair to anticipate a little bit of a step back when you lose a coach with almost 1,200 career wins and multiple national titles and one of the greatest coaches in the history of college sports? Yeah. I think you would expect a step back. I mean, you look throughout sports, you lose an all-time great, one of the greatest coaches. I think sometimes there's a regression. So I don't think that's kind of unfair to anticipate that. Do y'all?
No, I mean, I think it is already built up. I mean, now obviously, when you talk about the fact that, you know, is Duke, like, there's two things can be true, right, Kevin? Is Duke still Duke without Coach K? Yes and no. Like, yes, it is, but no, because it's half you watching Duke, right, and half you like, why they Duke? Because Duke, it seemed like Coach K got his own cam, right? Every call, there he go frowning his face up. Like, I'm sorry, your players foul people. I'm sorry, you lose. And Kevin and BJ, we are, you know, all the great Duke players are gonna be doing their commercials, talking about how great of a guy he is and all this. But he is gonna be missed. He is, because the evil empire known as Duke basketball. Duke basketball is equivalent to Dallas Cowboys football. They got a lot of fans for reasons I don't know why. Like, you don't live nowhere near Duke. You don't even know what state it's in.
A lot.
I'm just saying, I mean, I know we've been talking about Georgia. Georgia football fans become Duke Blue Devils during the basketball season.
I just look at what Duke is presently, which is like perennially top 5. Even when they, quote, have a down season, they're top 10. And I know they didn't have a great year this year, but I mean, is that going to be one of those things where you think about the blue bloods of college basketball, your Kansas, your Kentuckys, your North Carolinas? Is that Duke, or is that Duke because of Mike Krzyzewski? And if you put another guy in there, even if it's a Mike Krzyzewski guy, are they just continually one of the top 5 or 6 programs? I don't mean they're ranked top 5, but are they still one of the top 5 or 6 programs post Mike Krzyzewski like every single year?
I think it's fair to expect a little bit of a regression, and a lot of that's going to depend on
kind of
the higher. I don't know that it's as simple as yes or no. I mean, I think it's hard to replace a legend. I mean, I don't think that, but like Ben said, it's kind of yes and no, because you've established a tradition, but it's not going to be the same tradition, if that makes sense.
I still think they're going to be top 5 because, number one, Coach K was Coach K pre-social media, right? He was already that. Now you get all these rampant fans. So now you got all these supporters talking about what you wish you was. Y'all just, the Duke moniker is always, you just mad because 1, you can't beat us, and 2, you're not us. That's their moniker, right? And they have, right? Number one, I don't want to be y'all. But at the same time, too, Kevin, I think Duke is just that brand that's going to outlive Coach K. It's going to take a little while, but we got to get, whoever the new coach is, just get used to frowning up on the sideline all the time.
Yeah, Coach K announcing that 2021-2022 will be his last season as Duke head basketball coach, in his final regular season game, BJ, at home against North Carolina. So going to be an interesting way to send out the regular season there for Duke next year. We've got more to come. Jake Roos, UGAsports.com, will join us when we come back. We'll talk about Georgia's big day yesterday. And, of course, College Football Hall of Fame for initial list is out for this year as well. We'll get to that. Final hour, 3 and Out. Final hour here of 3 and Out on this Wednesday. Kevin, PJ, and Ben, glad you were with us here on the program. A lot to get to here this hour, including Georgia just had a huge day yesterday, getting big tight end, getting a cornerback who's going to step in and be cornerback number one. Joining us here, talk about that and more from UGAsports.com. Jake Roos joins us here on 3 and Out. Jake, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you guys for having me.
I appreciate you coming on. Obviously, two big gets yesterday for Georgia out of the transfer portal. How did they get Gilbert and Kendrick there in Athens?
Well, I think that it wasn't really much of a surprise necessarily with Darian Kendrick. I think that that was kind of from the get-go, it felt like that Georgia was probably the team to beat there. Really, you just had to get his legal issues cleared up, and once that was done, it was a full go. So, I don't think there was ever really a concern with him necessarily. With Gilbert, I think that was the situation where, I think he ended up kind of following through on his word, saying, look, I want to be a little closer to home. Homesickness was at play. I think that ended up benefiting Georgia pretty well. So, two huge pickups, very different reasoning, but Georgia very, very thrilled to have both, I'm sure.
So what type of impact players are these guys? I mean, not only are they proven, highly regarded players, but also at positions of need potentially for Georgia. I mean, are these guys just bona fide impact players, starters right away when you look at Georgia for this fall?
And it's hard to see otherwise, I think. I mean, when you're talking about it, impact players, Eric Gilbert was certainly that last year in the SEC. It felt like he was a guy who kind of just had his way as a freshman, was able to do a little bit of everything you needed him to, and came out and was super successful. And with Kendrick, you're talking about an all-ACC cornerback, a guy that had some draft buzz around his name prior to the dismissal from the Clemson team. So I think both of those guys slot in very early on. We'll see if it's game one or game two, but you got to think that by the end of the year, those guys are going to be seeing some very significant playing time.
And Jake, I mean, when you think about this Georgia team that was already loaded, obviously, they already talk about, Albert potentially going out there and, not replacing George Pickens, but playing the X position. People talk about branding. People talk about being able to, get players. It's one thing to want players, but to get the players you covet, got to say a lot about, Kirby Smart and him just living up to that moniker of being a big-time recruiter. But transfer portal is what he seemed to take over as well at this point.
Yeah, he's really mastered it. I think that's fair to say. When you're talking about these guys, look, probably three of the highest impact transfers in the nation, if not the three guys, in Tyke Smith and then the Gilbert and Kendrick. So he's done a masterful job with that. Like you said, it's got to be a situation where I think that he deserves a lot of credit for what he's been able to do. And you got to credit him a lot as well, I think, for maintaining relationships with guys. Not a guy who's burned a lot of bridges. They recruited Tyke Smith out of high school. Didn't go their favor. No worries. They still had an established bond there. Obviously, Jamal Adai helps that. Eric Gilbert, same thing. They recruited him very heavily. He ends up at LSU, but they say, hey, if things ever change, then you need to come home. Just let us know. They've done a great job of creating those bridges, maintaining those bridges, and keeping them open for guys to make their way back to Athens if they want.
Jake Roos, UGAsports.com, joining us here on 3 and Out. So you look at both those guys coming in yesterday. I mean, who is going to be the most impactful immediately once they step on campus?
For me, I think if you're talking about those guys, it's probably Kendrick just because of the need. I think that you get a bona fide all ACC guy, a guy who is going to be able to help you. You got to assume in that film room when you're game planning for Clemson, looking at some of the tendencies, looking at some of the things they do, he's going to know that offense inside and out. I think that he's got a big chance to kind of come in here, cement himself as cornerback one, and really be an impact from day one. That's not to say that Gilbert can't do the same, but I think that the option's a little bit more open when you're talking about that defensive backfield.
When you look at Gilbert, is he a wide receiver or a tight end for the Georgia Bulldogs?
I think he's going to be used in both ways, but I think primarily you'll see him split out at wide out. I think that he'll be doing most of his work out there. I think that you've got a superior blocker in Darnell Washington, and a guy who can do some of those same things when it comes to the tight end position. So I think that you're talking about, over the course of time, they've got their guy there at tight end. It looks like they need some help at receiver. That's what he's wanted to do, and really that's where he's best suited in terms of making an impact. So I think that you're going to see a heavy dose of Eric Gilbert at the wide receiver spot.
And even getting back to Kendrick, I mean, when you look at a guy who not only just knows Clemson offense, he's going to be able to take away the opposing team's number one receiver. How much is that going to help a team that's already loaded in the front seven, but some DBs that might need their time to gel has got to be great knowing I got a guy that I can say, listen, you're going to go with the best guy and let the other 10 guys go out there and work.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think that's exactly why you bring in a guy like Kendrick, because like you said, you've got an impressive front seven. Really, the question going into this offseason was about Georgia's secondary and how would they be able to thrive, with all this talent but lack of an experience. I think that you address those questions now, not only with Kendrick, Tyke Smith, Brandon Turnage from Alabama. These are guys that have high-level experience. They've been through big programs. They know what it takes to win. I think that those guys are going to be able to answer a lot of those questions, and certainly Kendrick being able to be your shutdown number one guy, that's huge for everybody involved.
And certainly, Jake, Kendrick's going to have to be that shutdown guy game one against Clemson. How quick do you think Georgia believes they can get a brand new secondary up to speed to play probably a top 5 team at worst in week one?
I think that they feel pretty good about their chances, given that everybody's now on campus. I mean, you've got several months now to kind of work these kinks out and work things out. Obviously, you can't do anything much until you get into fall practice, but they're going to be able to run some skeleton out there, and they're going to be able to go against those guys who are out there passing. They'll be playing a little 7-on-7, I'm sure, and sharpening their skills. This will be some player created stuff, and I think that they're going to have an opportunity to get out there and kind of work the kinks out, get some chemistry rolling, and really kind of find out who are some of the alpha dogs over the course of this summer.
Of course, recruiting now in full swing with student athletes on campus and visits and whatnot. Georgia's putting together another incredible class, of course, but what are the priorities right now looking at recruiting for Georgia's 2022 class?
Well, I think that number one, what you got to be looking at is the number one running back in America, and that's Branson Robinson coming in for his official visit this weekend. That's going to be huge for Georgia. They've got a chance, I think, to lock it down over the course of this weekend. He said as much, so going to be interesting to see if they'll be able to do that. I think outside of that, you've got to look maybe a little bit toward the wideout position. How do you restock there? And then I think definitely the big men up front. Not a very clear picture there. When it comes to this 2022 class in terms of Georgia, who's in, who's out, where do the top recruits stand when it comes to that? I think that they got to get some guys figured out on the offensive line. Maybe not the biggest need, but maybe the biggest question mark in terms of names right now.
Coach Monken adds another big-time, player with Gilbert. We look at what he brings to the table to go along with a big-time offense. Is it going to come down to how he manages all? Because, a lot of dogs to feed, only one football to feed them with. Is going to come down to how he goes about calling plays. Because we talk about the receivers, and we talk about JT Daniels. They still got a lot of running backs. So how does he handle that balance? Could it come down to the balance of the offense, Jake, at the end of this thing to really decide some of these games?
Well, I think that Georgia wants to be known as a running team. I think that that's Kirby Smart's identity. He wants to be able to force it down your throat and be able to run on you at will when necessary. But at the same time, look, they know the direction of college football. They've seen these offenses over the last couple of years. They've had an opportunity to see that you need to be able to strike from anywhere. So I think that they're going to go for a little bit more balanced attack. I think they'll lean on the run when they can, certainly. But this is going to be, I think, an opportunity for Todd Monken to really open the playbook up and really kind of explore these weapons, because they got them all over the field, multiple positions. It's going to be I think it'll be a fun experiment for Georgia fans to watch.
Jake Roos, UGAsports.com. Kind of speaking of the new kind of direction of college football, Georgia just got 2 huge recruits through the transfer portal. Obviously, do you think that becomes a part of the process? Obviously, with what we've seen this year, where teams are obviously looking at recruiting high school kids, but certainly if you can get a 2 or 3 year starter from another school. How do you see Georgia utilizing transfer portal players in the future as it relates to recruiting?
No, that's you touched on it perfectly, and that's that you've got established guys out there already. I mean, you've got guys. Listen, Brandon Turnage hasn't played a lot of snaps, but the fact of the matter is, he's been in Alabama system. He understands how Georgia practices. He's been up against some of the best in the SEC. He's cut his teeth against those guys. Same thing with a guy like Eric Gilbert. I mean, a great program at LSU, going up against top level talent day in and day out. They wanted to take the opportunity on those guys who are a little bit more proven commodities than some of these high school players. Now, certainly you're going to stick with high school recruiting. That's your lifeblood. But the transfer portal is as important as anything that's going on in college football right now. It changes the landscape. I mean, Georgia is not the same team 2 days ago that they are today. So, it's able to shift things that mightily and that powerfully, that quickly. The transfer portal, a huge part of the game moving forward. And, Georgia playing it right now about as well as anyone.
Finally, a couple of dogs on the Hall of Fame ballot when you talk about college football, legendary names, Champ Bailey and Garrison Hurst. Do you think those guys are college football Hall of Famers this year?
I think Champ Bailey got to be up there, certainly. I mean, Garrison Hurst deserves his consideration, too, but there's a lot of guys on that ballot this year, so it'll be interesting. But Champ Bailey, in my mind, no question, as versatile a player as we've ever seen in college football, a guy who's done it all and done it at every level. So I think that definitely very deserving, and look forward to him getting that opportunity.
Jake Roos, UGAsports.com, our guest here on 3 and Out. Jake, appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Thank you, guys.
Jake Roos, UGAsports.com, joining us here on 3 and Out. And again, I think you look at how Georgia was able to change their team through the transfer portal. To me, that's still going to be the biggest question around collegiate football, or really athletics, is, all right, if I can take 18 guys, do I really take 15 and get 3 transfers that I can really target postseason to fix whatever holes or problems I have on my roster? To me, I think a program like Georgia able to land 2 guys that can change a program in the direction that a lot of people think those 2 will, I think it just becomes a bigger and bigger portion of recruiting, the high school guys plus the transfer portal.
It becomes easier. I mean, the whole thing about it is, Kevin, if you work at one company doing something and it doesn't work out, I mean, there are other companies that can utilize, your services, and you got to look at recruiting the same way. The hardest thing for any student athlete to do is get acclimated to college. That is the hardest thing to do, both students and athletes. So you know how rough it is for the athlete in general. If I got a guy that's been acclimated to college, it doesn't matter where he's coming from. I could bring him into my system. It's something that Jake said. I mean, I never ever thought about the fact that Kirby Smart is still making sure he's not burning bridges just because the guy, hey, man, wish we could have got you, man, wish you nothing but the best. But if they get the tripping over there, man, you can always come home, because I think that's a big thing to do when you talk, because the one thing about Georgia, you're going to get that brand, you're going to get that exposure, and you're going to be a top 3 or 4 team in the country. So yes, the transfer portal is going to work for guys who have 5 stars next to their name who can fill a need. But don't get it twisted, Kevin. That transfer portal, some guys have went in and never to be seen from or heard from again. So I just think that while it does work for some, this is not a one size fits all type thing.
We've got more to come here on 3 and Out, including BJ mentioned the College Football Hall of Fame. We'll do a little Hall of Fame or no with some of the college football potential inductees. We'll get to that next. It's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. It is 3 and Out all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Kevin, BJ, and Ben. So much to get to still here on the shows. We count you up to Braves and Nationals game. What game is it? Game 3 of that 4-game series. Memorial Day Monday has got me all messed up on what day of the week it is, as opposed to my normal don't know what the day of the week it is. But College Football Hall of Fame list is out there with potential nominees for this year. I know a lot of folks saying, hey, no Irk Russell on there, and all other kinds of travesties that are out there with the College Football Hall of Fame. But want to take this opportunity to do something we haven't done in a while, play a little Hall of Fame or not college football edition.
It's time to play Hall of Fame
or nah.
All right, fellas, I will give you someone on the list for the College Football Hall of Fame. You tell me yes or nah. Very simple rules to the game. Not a lot of thinking involved necessarily, but here we go. Eric Berry, Hall of Fame or nah? College football.
Yes. One of the best safeties in the history of college football. Yes, absolutely.
Yes, Eric Berry was a Heisman Trophy. I mean, they did a Heisman Trophy campaign before he even started that season. He had a big, gigantic like blow up doll of him or something on campus. It was crazy. But yes, Eric Berry, absolutely. All
right, let's jump around here. I'm trying to find some guys that you might be on the fence about, because some of them I feel like I will say just be like, yes, like I won't even get the name out. Like a Champ Bailey. Like, yes, of course. So I'm trying to find some guys that you might be on the fence about. Ken Dorsey, Miami.
That's a good one. That's a tough one. I mean, man, because incredible career when you think about the success, the wins. I know some people might say, hey, you weren't one of the 7 or 8 or 10 best players on your own team, but those were the super teams. I lean no. I lean no because I don't know if he was one of the 2 or 3 best quarterbacks in the country during his time. That's tough. That's a good one, Kevin. I will lean no.
I will go no because I think they won in spite of, not because of. I mean, he was given a bunch of Ferraris. He didn't wreck them. No.
Wow, harsh there on. I think he's.
Hold on, I thought you were like that. You always get on Ben and I for saying we put everybody in. I'm trying to make you happy.
That is true. Hey, that's fine. Fair enough. I do think you guys give everybody the keys to the Ferrari. Ben just said no. You just said don't wreck it. He didn't. That's fine. All right. And again, this is college career only. It has nothing to do with what they were able to do in the pros. Hall of Fame or not? Let's go with somebody I brought up. Toby Gerhart, really good at Stanford. Good enough to get in the Hall of Fame or not?
I would say no, really good. And you've talked about this before, you can acknowledge that someone had an all-time great career and say they were one of the best players in the country, but maybe not quite, all time. And you talk about telling the story of the position. I don't know that you have to get to him right away. So close, had an incredible career, but I'll say no.
I'm going to say no, and not even because of the emergence of what Christian McCaffrey was able to do at Stanford, BJ. I just think that when you look at Toby Gerhart, yes, he was a battering ram and nobody could, but he was good, not great. Not like, oh my God, when I hear this name. So for me, if I got to hesitate at all, that's a no, even though he was really, 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 really good.
All right. Another guy I think could fall in this category, had a great collegiate career, Graham Harrell.
Oh, that's tough because you think about the stats. I mean, and you think about the wins. I mean, they were competing on a national level. Man, the stats are right there. That is really tough. Man, see, Ben, why can't you go first with some of the? Hold on. I will say yes. Because he helped kind of change the some of the ways that college football offenses measure production. I'm going to say yes. Close. I'm going to say yes.
Graham Harrell threw 40-something touchdowns to one dude. I'm going to say no because I just think that. Michael Crabtree was just that freaking good when he was at Texas. I love Graham Harrell, but I'm just saying I'm going to go no.
Again, we have a huge list of names. I'm just trying to give you guys that I think could be on the fence, yes or no. I mean, there are guys that may not get in this year, but will probably get in because they're slam dunks. But I'm trying to find some of those guys that might make you think or give you at least a moment of pause before you have to answer. What about a guy like Brady James at LSU?
Wow. And Ben, all right, now I will say this. I don't, there are some linebackers you look at here, and we were talking about like LeVar Arrington, one of the greatest of all time. Everybody knows that. I don't know that everybody has that first reference with Brady James, but when Ben, you and I have talked before, just talking about SEC football, just casually talking on the weekends about how he's so underrated and one of the all-time greats. Man, my gut's telling me yes.
But this is the thing. Oh, man, Brady James is good. So he played a long time. I think, 10 years in the league with them Dallas Cowboys. He was good, BJ. But once again, you know what they're going to do now? This is what they're going to do. They're going to compare him to Devin. So, you know they're going to do it. Like, was he that impactful? And rightfully so, right? When I think of – there's a guy on this list from LSU by the name of Kevin Falk. He needs to be in. I think Brady's on the outside looking in. Great player, though.
Now, again, I'm trying to make it some gut-wrenching decisions for you here on this College Football Hall of Fame list. Mind you, I know we've talked about this in the past. You got to be a first-team All-American to be eligible for this thing. So I know a guy like Howard Schnellenberger not eligible because he didn't have a high enough winning percentage. I think he was at 51%. You got to be over 60. I mean, never mind that you resurrected a program 2 or 3 times in college football there as well. I just have Kellen Moore at Boise State. Very interesting one there.
I think that's yes. I mean, when you talk, Kevin, you're going to get mad at me because I'm going to end up putting like 19 of 20 guys in. But, dude, you think about Kellen Moore. I mean, Boise State became a national phenomenon. I mean, you're talking about that in some ways they kind of changed college football, right? I mean, Boise State creating opportunities maybe for mid-major programs moving forward. Moore was one of the most efficient, productive quarterbacks in the country. Huge wins. I saw him beat Georgia in Atlanta. I mean, I think you got to say yes.
Yes, I mean, once again, some of these guys I thought should have already been in by now. I remember that opening game of the year against the Georgia Bulldogs when they had them Power Ranger-looking helmets, and Kellen Moore came out there and shut it down. But yeah, Kellen Moore is the reason why, you're talking about waving a mid-major flag. He was doing it when nobody was doing it but him. Kellen Moore should be in, yes.
All right, here, since I've given you so much stress, apparently, I will step back and give you a layup. Bryant McKinney.
Oh man. Oh, and Ben. No, Ben.
The finger roll.
We've talked about this. He's in the conversation for greatest college football player ever. When you think about and you normally don't talk about offensive tackles like that, right? I mean, normally you think about best players ever. We all go quarterback, running back, maybe an edge rusher. McKinney was the anchor of the Miami Dynasty teams, the teams that were just embarrassing people. We're playing Florida State. We're going to win by 21. We're in the national title game. We're going to win by 30. I don't think ever allowed a sack in his college career. You're talking about one of the all-time. Thank you, Kevin. I was getting stressed out. Yes, obviously, yes.
Of course, and the whole thing about it, listen, you want to see a battle, Dwight Freeney, who I think might be on this list too. When he was at Syracuse, he was killing everybody. When he played against the Miami boys, they said, man, don't get friendly this week. Nope. Sorry, the club is closed, sir. I understand. I understand this is your party. The club is closed. We do not check ID. We do not let anybody in. Brian McKinney, and he made it look easy. Like, he's the only offensive lineman while the offense is running. They ain't do no hurry up when he was at Miami. No, that wouldn't happen with Brian. But you're talking about just a pure technician. He went to the U and he stood out. And he played offensive lineman. That's all you need to know. With all those, with the Ed Reeds of the world, I'm just saying the Kellen Winslow's of the world, Brian McKinney. Oh yeah, that's B. McKinney, man. He don't give up nothing. So yes.
All right, let's give you a couple more that you have to think about here, because I think this next guy I give you might be more known for what he did in the pros, but Jeremy Maclin out of Mizzou.
Oh
boy, and he was one of those all-purpose. Right, do it all, big time playmaker. All right, Kevin. I'm going to do this because of you, because I can feel your energy. You're getting mad at me. I'm going to say, and versatile, all-purpose yards, but I'm going to say no because I think Kevin's getting mad at me about the number of players I'm putting in. He was giving us a lecture in the show meeting about that's why it's the Hall of Fame. It's not the Hall. You got it.
Yeah.
It's tough. I guess I'm going to say no.
Yeah, listen. J-Mac was nice at Mizzou. He was nice, but not. Not the kind of nice to the point where BJ he just jump out. Like if I stuck him in a room with a bunch of great receivers in college, he would just blend in. He wouldn't stand out. I love what he did with Kansas City when he was in the league, and Philadelphia. He was nice, but I'm gonna go no for J-Man.
All right, here's what I think is interesting because of where he played, and obviously his pro career didn't go a certain way, but he was the number 1 overall pick. That's Tim Couch out of Kentucky.
Yeah, he's in. No, he's in, man. You talk about the passing production, and you think about doing it in the SEC. I mean, when the SEC East was something serious, you're talking about like video game numbers. And this is not what you did in the pros. And look, he had a good pro career. Maybe didn't have the 20-year career or whatever. But I think you're talking about Tim Couch, yes, as one of the best quarterbacks in SEC history and absolutely a college football Hall of Famer.
Yes, I mean the thing about Tim Couch too. I mean I think he had he was on the front cover of magazine with the Flight of Jet jacket on because he just lighted up through there. He started BJ. You talk about what Taj Boyd did for Clemson. I mean he started that Jerry Lorenz and Shane and Shane Boyd, those type guys coming through there. But yes, Tim Couch, he is a Hall of Famer. Absolutely for what he did at Kentucky. Yes.
All right, I lied. I said I was done. I'm not. We have coaches that are eligible as well. This is a guy I think is an interesting case because of where he got his start. Larry Coker, Miami, and then finished up at UT San Antonio. Obviously, he's got the winning percentage, but he also came in on the heels of some Miami greatness.
He did. He did. And I saw a number of those teams in person in the early 2000s, and you're talking about teams that just embarrassed the opponent. I mean, teams that just overwhelmed even top 5, top 10 teams. Look, I know a lot of people will say you had incredible talent, but you still were the head coach that won national championships, that had winning streaks. I don't know that you're talking about Larry Coker as Nick Saban, but I still think when you talk about those Miami teams, you got to talk about him. He was recruiting guys. He was putting guys in a position to be successful. So I'm going to say yes.
I'm going to say yes too because the whole thing about it is too. The word dynasty is thrown around too much. I mean, Miami. I mean, he was a part of that dynasty era. When you talk about the Miami teams, unfortunately, I was in college with those dynasty teams. I got to play against Miami. I don't know, not 1, not 2, but 3 times as a freshman, as a junior, and as a senior. I just think that BJ, when you start looking at those 30 for 30s, his face keeps popping up because we listen. It's the players and the head coach that they monitor behind. He didn't keep those guys from stop those guys. Well, he couldn't stop those guys. Now he was there for the good, and he was there for the bad too. But he was out. But he was there for the stellar. So I go, yeah, he's in.
I think he's close in my book. I don't know that it's a slam dunk that he gets in. That's just a quick look at some of the guys who are up there on the College Football Hall of Fame.
That was emotionally exhausting. That was draining. I'm exhausted. I need a nap.
That's why we do those exercises to just wear you out. But Champ Bailey and where am I looking at on the list? Garrison Hurst, both from Georgia on that list. For potential College Football Hall of Fame status. We've got more to come. It's 3 and Out all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Good to have you here at 3 and Out on this Wednesday. Kevin, BJ, and Ben. Game 5 tonight up in New York. Do the Hawks close it out? And it's been kind of a silence the naysayers type series. Going in, it was, oh man, this is an evenly matched series. New York Knicks, could it be back? Could the Garden be rocking once again? And then after you get a couple of games in, it's the Hawks are just tremendously better. And it's been a physical, try to bully you up series, and the Hawks haven't backed down from it. I think it's been an interesting series from that point, because coming in this year, the expectations for Atlanta were very, very, very modest. And I mean, very modest. If I'm not mistaken, we were talking, hey, maybe Lloyd Pierce, if they missed the playoffs by a game or two, that might be good progress. Maybe they could be the 8th team getting in to the NBA playoffs. Not only that, they were way farther up than that and have a chance to advance on into round number 2. I don't think anybody foresaw that coming, much less a team that plays with heart, passion, and intensity on the defensive side of the ball. They were the definition of soft basketball under Lloyd Pierce. It was all offense. If you could kind of get in somebody's way and slow them down on defense, that might be good enough. But that totally changed that mindset here in the last half of the season. It's kind of come to the forefront here in this series versus the Knicks.
And in an era of basketball where, it's up tempo, a lot of threes. I mean, even in the playoffs, you see scores that are like 130 to 125, 120 to 115. The Hawks have held the Knicks to the 90s a couple of times. And at the end of the regular season, they were holding teams to less than 100 points. Very impressive. And I think about 3 things when I think about Atlanta basketball here. I think about having a superstar, and Trae Young is that. And we all owe Trae Young just a round of applause for what he's done. I mean, a lot of people very early were saying, oh man, defensively, what's he doing? Offensively, he takes a lot of shots. He's emerged as a superstar player, a tone setter, a scorer, a leader. And I think he deserves just a ton of credit for what he's done. Still very young, and what he's doing is really impressive. And then I think about offensive balance. While you got to have a superstar, you also got to have 4 or 5 guys who can score. And I love that about this team. You're talking about Bogdanovich. You're talking about Collins. You're looking at Lou Williams. You're looking at Herter. You're looking at Gallinari. You're talking about Capella. I mean, you got multiple guys, Hunter, who can score the basketball. I think Bob Rathman said, 10 guys at 9 points or more, or something crazy like that. So you have multiple options who can get hot, guys who can shoot. And if Trae Young needs a break, or if Trae Young isn't having his best night offensively, you can still score 100, 110 points. That's very impressive. And then I think about the defense. Like you said, sometimes in basketball, in the playoffs, even in an era of high-scoring play, you got to grind it down. You got to play half-court ball. And really good teams that win in the postseason can both get up and down and play up-tempo basketball, and when the circumstances call for it, Ben, grind it out. Win on the block. Clean up the glass, get a stop, be physical. And I think it's been really impressive to watch Atlanta, kind of depending upon the situation, go from being, push the basketball up tempo to slow it down, grind it out. Clint Capella led the NBA in rebounding during the regular season, great shot blocker. But even the guys on the wing done a really good job defending the perimeter. So I think those 3 things stand out. That's going to determine if they can close it out tonight.
You got 3 things, BJ. I got 3 words. Battle tested, unfazed. When I see Atlanta, because the thing about it is, Kevin, we forget. Atlanta it's a pretty nice sized media market. It ain't LA, it ain't New York, but it's rough. It's rough if you're not winning. And if you Trae Young, everything was because of him, right? If they win, it's because of him. If they lose, it's because of him. If the team is up, it's because of him. Team is down, it's because of him, because he was a superstar. He was a big name player. And everybody gonna be comparing what he didn't do. No, this guy, we knew he could score. So Nate McMillan just sitting back. He's going, look, I need you guys to buy in. Do you know how good of a team you guys can be if you guys can just buy in, at the end of each quarter? And then can you close out a quarter? Can you close out a game? So when I say they're unfazed, they started out in the Garden. Most teams don't want to deal with that much smoke in the playoffs. The Garden is rough to go in there and win. I just think that when you look at what Atlanta brings to the table, look, man, those guys look around and say, look, we know, how easy it is to go out there and be a professional athlete when nobody expects anything from you. They know. We know that we aren't the media darlings. We know we ain't the one that pushed the NBA narrative, because we the Atlanta guys that wear MLK on our chest because we trying to pay homage. We the guys to where, y'all don't like when we come out with the peak jerseys, not because they smooth, but because you can't. So I just think that when you look at this team now, if they don't win, it's because they tailed off a little bit. Like persona-wise, mentality-wise. But BJ, Trae Young wants it. Like Trae Young don't got to talk trash. To that New York crowd. He don't got to talk trash to Spike Lee. He don't got to say, I heard, what they were saying about, but that's embracing it. That's saying, look, I grew up watching, what goes on in the Madison Square Garden. I grew up, wanting to go up against these teams. And here he is. And I kept saying, everybody can say New York, that's a very favorable matchup against Atlanta. I'm like this. Based off of what? Y'all best player ain't better than our best player. Y'all second best player ain't better than our second best player. Y'all coach ain't better than our coach. And y'all team ain't better than our team as a whole. And y'all got a former MVP on y'all team in Derrick Rose. So I think when you look at the elements of what makes a good team, as you mentioned, be a superstar. Check. Great role players. Check. Buying into the coach's, mentality. Check. Go out there and play ball. Check. And can you adjust when you try to get bullied? But Clint Capella said, man, y'all funny, man. Y'all ain't finna bully us.
I think you're right about Capella because, the Hawks have been able to shoot for a while. They've had the scores, but it's like Kevin said, and like you mentioned, Capella, really gave you this dynamic, shot blocking, rebounding, can run the floor kind of big man. He has been fantastic. And I know he was really productive and was on some great teams in Houston, but he has been a real difference maker for this Atlanta team.
The BJ, the whole thing about any team, but we talk about a superstar in basketball like you don't need one in football, like you don't need one in baseball, but it always comes down to the role player, right? If you got role players that not just understand their role, but embrace it. Do you embrace your role? I think Atlanta does that because they won't trade to do the interviews. They won't trade to be the focal point. And they know that for them to have success, Trae has to play well. Check. Because he's averaging, he's averaging what? I think around in the 30s, in the low 30s or whatever, up to higher 20s. They're not gonna foul him. They're not gonna foul him. If he got fouled as much as James Harden, he wouldn't even have to score. During the game, he can get. But I just think that Nate McMillan, man, a lot of credit goes to him because it's something to sit back and watch talent and see what they lacking. And he was able to take over for Lloyd Pierce and Kevin did. I said we were saying come out of the weekend would it be 3-1, 2-2. And we were talking about in favor of the Knicks. No, we never ever considered it's them A-Town down boys. Sorry, Spike Lee. You know what I'm saying? Different team, same result. That ain't Reggie Miller. His name was Trae Young, and he about to move on.
Yeah, again, going to round two, I think will be a huge leap here for what we've seen from this Atlanta Hawks team, who has a lot of young talent. Again, I think they start the year with all first-round draft picks in their starting lineup. So a lot of young talent there in Atlanta. We've got more to come here on 3 and Out, counting you up towards Braves and Nationals a little bit later tonight. At 6:05, we'll have pregame coverage. It is 3 and Out all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Oh, great to be here with you on this Wednesday. Shane Matthews is going to join us on 3 and Out tomorrow. Looking forward to talking with him, former Florida Gator quarterback, tomorrow on the program. Braves coming up tonight. It'll be John Lester against Drew Smiley. Braves have tinkered with their lineup a little bit in that they have moved Ian Anderson back to Friday so he can pitch against the Dodgers. Dodgers coming to town this weekend, so they'll have Ian Anderson, Charlie Morton, and Max Fried pitching against the Dodgers. And I guess Bryce Wilson, they haven't announced who's pitching tomorrow, which is an afternoon game, by the way. But potentially speculation that's going to be Bryce Wilson. So the Braves in a little bit of a pitching dilemma. They get John Lester on short rest tonight for the Nationals. So maybe a chance to jump on him and see if the Braves can get right back in the win column.
Well, and Atlanta's had great success against the Nats. But look, Drew Smiley's ERA is 5.95. You need better. I mean, he's a veteran. He's had some success at the major league level. You're paying him a decent amount of money. And Kevin, you mentioned it. He's in the show meeting, he's had a couple of good starts. He's shown you that he's capable of getting into the 6th inning, the 7th inning. Limiting some of the production, but you got to have it tonight. Last time out, he was not good. That ERA 5.95. Again, that's tough to win with. So you need a good start from Smiley tonight.
We can't keep taking a step forward and taking 2 steps back. I know this Braves team is good enough to go out there and beat anybody they play against. I think they had won 6 in a row against the Nats until the loss last night. But Kevin, I mean, I'm not trying to get my BJ on. I see that 3.5. I don't want the 3.5 become 4.5, 4.5 become 5.5, because you spend the rest of the season trying to catch up, and then you might lose. That might take all the energy you got. I'm not panicking right now because we are still pre-All-Star break. So I'm not tripping. But Kevin, after the All-Star break, after everybody then, shook hands and say, hey, man, have a good rest of the season. Then I'm going to be like, all right, because right now, Drew Smiley. And I like what you said, Kevin. You said Ian Anderson, Max Fried,
Charlie Morton.
Charlie Morton. Could that be a preview of things to come in the playoffs? I'm just saying. I mean, because,
Whoa.
I'm just saying. Will Smith did look like Will Smith 2 games ago, but you're only as good as your current game, and we saw what happened last night.
We'll have to see if they can get there first. They got a long ways to go. But yeah, no, again, post All-Star break, when the trade deadline heats up, that's when you really start to see teams position for the final push there. But yeah, this is a Nationals team that's struggling. You'd like to pick up some wins. I mean, realistically, the Dodgers series is, even though it's at home, it's not one that you just walk into as like, oh yeah, we feel like we could take 2 out of 3 or even 3 out of 3. Maybe you can. The Dodgers have had their moments of scuffling here in 2021, but again, it's not a series you just walk into. It's like, yep, we feel good about every single one of these games coming up. So you'd like to take the next 2 against the Nationals, little momentum going into that Dodgers series where let's just be real. You're going to have to play well in order to come out of there with a couple of wins.
Yeah, I mean, the Dodgers are probably not living up to preseason expectations, but have still been one of the best teams in baseball. So yeah, you need to get these wins. You got the Cardinals coming up. You got, the Phillies again coming up. You got the Mets again coming up. So yeah, when you play these teams that you feel like you're better than, and it's kind of hard to explain because the Nats have a lot of talent. They've just not been good. I mean, quite frankly, this year, and you've had a lot of success. So keep it going tonight. Bounce back. You got to get a good start from Drew Smiley.
Absolutely. So we will have that coming up here in about 7 minutes. Here we'll have Braves pregame for the Braves and Nationals, again, afternoon baseball. So we'll join you following Braves baseball tomorrow afternoon here on 3 and Out. So look forward to joining you then. If you missed any portion of the show, if you missed us chatting with Jake Grain of the J-Boy Show, he said, look, it's championship or bust for Kirby Smart. Our conversation with Jake Roos, UGAsports.com. Go to ESPNCoastal.com, Spotify, go to our YouTube page, get a podcasted version of the show there each and every day for 3 and Out. We will see you tomorrow following the Braves baseball, Braves and Nats coming up in about 7 minutes right here. We'll see you tomorrow, 3 and Out, Southern Pigskin Radio Network.